Welcome to the next episode of the Sensible Mama podcast. I am super excited because today is our first guest who is a VBAC home birth mama. And I made myself a promise that I would define what VBAC meant right from the get-go. So it's vaginal birth after C-section. And honestly, that's about as much as I know about it because I don't have the experience, which is why I'm super excited to have Desirae here. She's going to tell us all about her experience with this, and I'm super duper excited. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just dive right in.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so excited to be here and thank you for having me. Um, I am a mama of two. That's VBAC means that I had more than one child. Um, but I experienced a lot of like negativity in the prenatal space as far as healthcare and things, but I also had a redemption story with my VBAC and at home on accident. So I have a lot to share. I'm excited to share with you.
That is awesome. All right. So I guess let's take our viewers through your first birth story. You can start with the prenatal experience because that seems to be kind of a common thread. Like the system doesn't seem to live up to what we all need and want. So walk
Exactly.
us through that.
So I've heard it in your previous podcast as well. When I was pregnant with my first baby, the doctors diagnosed me with IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction. Means
Mm,
that my baby was measuring small. And the doctor that did my anatomy scan, he told me, he said, I'm not concerned with how small your baby is because you're pretty petite. And mom's bodies grow the babies the size that they can fit. And so he suggested intake of more protein, but that was pretty much it. But my actual providers, they were very concerned, and I was with a group of midwives at a hospital, and
mm.
so they were concerned, and they wanted to label me high risk. And it pretty much was you need to do another anatomy scan, XYZ, or we're going to term services. And so I took it upon myself to terminate services and find somewhere else to go. Because it's like a threat. And I'm like, if nothing, no other health concerns are going on with my baby, I'm not concerned about it being petite. I was born small as well. So um, I found another group of midwives, and after another anatomy scan, they
May I
also,
ask how far along were you when you switched providers the first time?
I was about 21, 22 weeks. Right
Wow.
after that 20-week anatomy scan.
Yep.
And then when I went to the new group of midwives, they took another anatomy scan and they referred me to high risk because they said I still had IUGR. And so probably about 26 or 27 weeks, I had to go back to the high risk. I went to the same hospital, but with high risk doctors.
Mhm.
And so from 27 weeks on, I had a new provider and I was very adamant about like not having a C-section if it was not necessary. And they reaffirmed me so many times. They're like, we're a teaching hospital. That's not our first go-to, only in emergency cases. So I trusted them.
Mhm.
Um, And then they also wanted to induce me at 37 weeks due to that IUGR because with that, they think that the placenta is not providing enough nutrients to your baby. And
They think
so
that, or do they have some way
they
to know
think
that
that there's
for
no
sure?
way to test until baby is born and they test your placenta. So, me not knowing much about induction, I'm like, I can still labor naturally with induction. So I agreed to that. I went in at 37 weeks for induction and I wanted to labor naturally, which meant I was okay with like IV pain meds, but I did not want an epidural if I could bear it.
Yeah.
And so when they place that Foley balloon inside you, which is like a balloon they insert in your cervix and then they inflate it with water or saline or something to help
That
you
sounds so
dilate,
awful.
it was awful from minute one. And it was like I was expecting contraction labor. So I knew that I would like a contraction, have a break, contraction, have a break. But that balloon did not give me any breaks. And I was like, I want the epidural now. So
No.
I ended up getting an epidural later on that evening after they started Pitocin. Pitocin started making baby's heart rate drop, and so they had to stop it. And then they started it again, and they said after if it happens again after this, we won't try Pitocin anymore. We'll just recommend a C-section. And
Oh
it
boy.
happened again where baby's heart rate dropped. So of course I'm fighting against C-section. I'm like, nothing else is wrong with baby. Can I just labor naturally? And the doctor on call, she came in and she was like, yeah, you can, and you can have a dead baby.
Oh
Just like
no.
that, very blunt and yeah. And so that was a fear monger tactic. It scared me, and I was like, I
I
don't want to put my baby.
literally got like chills when you said that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And my husband was livid, but he couldn't do much because he wanted to be there for the birth of our baby. So he didn't advocate how he could have. Um, and so because he didn't want to get kicked out, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Gee.
Um, and so I went ahead and with the C-section, and my baby was born 4 pounds. She was completely healthy. But they sent her to the NICU because of her weight and not hooked up to anything but a heart rate monitor. And because she was in the NICU, I couldn't see her for 12 hours after she was born because I had to get wear off the epidural, be able to walk on my own before I could go to the NICU and see her. So I was torn up, baby blues all day. Well, even while she was in the NICU as well, but I was crying that whole day. And I finally got to see her. They kept her in NICU for 10 days without really any explanation. They just kept saying we want to continue to monitor her. She wasn't given any meds, no interventions.
Mm.
So that was frustrating as well. And then she came home, and we haven't had any issues since then. But that was rough from pregnancy and postpartum, those first 10 days.
Wow. That is quite like it's so funny. Like, all I have to go off of is my own experience and now the stories that I get to hear from all the mamas that I speak to. And every time the experience is so different. It's so,
Hmm.
unique to each mom and each pregnancy, but man, like I listened to that and there were so many opportunities through that whole experience where something could have gone different and someone could have
Yeah,
handled it differently. And like, who knows? In many cases, maybe a C-section is actually necessary, but the way that you get somebody to that is not by threatening them with a dead baby. I'm sorry. That's just
seriously, seriously.
I can't even imagine like labor is already so intense, like hormones and mentally and physically and spiritually. It is an experience unlike any other, and you're already going.
Absolutely.
You've never done something like that before. When you're a first time mom, it's all new and it's a lot.
Exactly.
Even when you're like everything is going exactly according to plan, it's still a lot.
Yes.
And so like add to that the stress and the fear and the uncertainty and then the threat of a dead baby when in fact, according to your own story, your baby was little but
Perfect.
totally fine. Like they didn't there was no actual threat of a dead baby like in the real world.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah. So
So
heartbreaking.
how did you like because this is another thing that came up in the last episode as well, like some people having gone through an experience like that would say that's it. I'm done, no more. If there's any chance of that happening again, no thank you very much. And like I've met people like that and I'm like, I don't know, like I probably would have done the same. I probably would have just said no. One and done, one kid and no more. So what was it that inspired you to give it another go?
So even prior to me becoming pregnant the first time, I was very intentional about like preparing my body for pregnancy and childbirth, eating better. Um, I don't know if you've heard of the term crunchy mom, but I think I
I
was
wrote an article. I'll send it to you later. I was in denial for a really long time. It took me some time to come to terms with the fact that this is a crunchy mom, and I was like, nah, I'm not crunchy.
yes. So I don't know if the listeners don't know what a crunchy mom is. It's a mom who wants their kids to eat healthy. Some of them are screen free, Montessori style, all those types of things. They want the
Mhm.
best for their babies. But I think that I was crunchy prior to becoming pregnant, just because I had dealt with eczema my whole life and I started to eat healthier, use clean products,
I have
not
literally
have.
the same story. Literally, like
Wow,
that's you're describing me. I've had eczema since I was, I don't know, preteen, and didn't like I was using topical steroids and the
me too. And
whole
I went through the withdrawals and everything.
awful. And then finally, I like kind of learned that hey, if I drink more water, good things happen. If I eat sugar, I have a reaction. Lots of dairy, I have a reaction. I was
Yep.
like, wait, you mean to say like I can actually control this? And stress has a big anyway, and that's kind of what like
Wow.
took me down the path of crunchiness, if you will.
Wow, same. So cool. So yeah, and then I also followed like my Instagram timeline is pregnancy, childbirth, all that. So I knew that there was a different way, and I wanted a home birth from the beginning, but when we got pregnant, I hadn't realized the expense of a midwife or having a home birth and things like that. And so we hadn't prepared for that. And so I was like, okay, let's have the hospital birth this time. And then any pregnancies after that, we'll go midwife, home birth, all those things. And
Mm,
so even after that hospital experience kind of confirmed it for me. I'm like, what I wanted was the way to go all along. And not to say like things can't go wrong with the home birth and with the midwife,
of course, sure.
because my second story also has its issues. But I also have faith that it could be much better than this hospital experience. And even had my midwife in my second pregnancy wanted to refer me to that hospital because it is the best hospital in my city. But I was like, absolutely not.
Like been there, done that. No, thank you very
Yeah.
much. All right, so I have read your birth story for your second, but I'm super excited to hear it again because it is something. So
Wild.
let's yeah, take us through that.
So I started, well, I didn't start with the midwife actually.
Mm,
When we went the midwife route, I actually ran into one who took insurance, and I was like, we're prepared to come out of pocket, but even better if our insurance can cover some of it. And so we ended up switching to the insurance that she takes. So that took a little while. And during that time, I went and saw an OB just to make sure baby was okay,
mhm.
while we waited for that transition. First OB visit had me in tears. Horrible. She
What did they say?
um she pretty much was like, "You know you're high risk, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what they say." And she was like, "Do you know why?" And I was like, "Well, because I had a previous C-section." And she was like, "Also because it's been less than a year since your previous delivery." And by the
Mm,
time I was going to deliver, I would have been 17 months out from pregnancy to pregnancy, and I have done my research, and I was in the clear um, to have a VBAC. And so I was like, "Yeah, I've heard that, but I don't plan to deliver here. I'm gonna use a midwife." And she was like, "Can I be honest with you?" I was like, "Sure. Everybody wants to be honest. Go ahead." And so she was like, I do not recommend that at all. You could risk a uterine rupture, and I hope that your midwife can catch something like that. I hope that your midwife is connected to a good enough doctor. And if they're connected to a good doctor, then they wouldn't recommend that. Just very negative. And I just burst into tears. And I'm like, I have been trying to advocate for myself from first pregnancy, and this is what I keep getting over and over and over again. And I don't think it's fair because they tell me the risks of VBAC or whatever I'm advocating for, but not the risks of what they're advocating for. And there
right.
are risks on both ends. So, yeah, that was pretty rough. And as I continued to see the OB, I did switch. She sent me to a high risk doctor because they diagnosed me high risk. I still had my issues there as far as like not being able to take my baby to the appointment and things like that. So just did different little things. And I finally switched to the midwife, and everything went well. She prepared me very well for labor. She gave me tinctures, all the things to prepare for labor. Um, as labor got closer, she she heavily pushed like, don't come to the birth center until your contractions are 5 minutes apart. lasting at least a minute for at least an hour.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we'll just be sitting ducks here looking at each other, and you don't want that. And even if I had done a hospital birth, my plan was to labor for as long as I could at home, so I was totally fine with that.
Yeah.
She also emphasized, if I went into labor in the middle of the night, she was like, if it's still early labor, don't call me, because you want me to be well rested and things like that. But send me a text, update me, all that. Okay. And mind you, I never went through labor. Realistically, I never went through labor. I was on Pitocin and epidural, so I don't know what to expect, what all this entails. Um, and so I trusted all that she said. I ended up going to 41 weeks. I saw my midwife probably, I think, the day before I went into labor, and started feeling contractions around midnight. I started tracking them around 1 a.m. And then my husband woke up for work, and I let him know, hey, I think I'm in labor. So he called in. I called my midwife about 7 a.m. No answer. I left a voicemail. My husband called a couple hours later, no answer, left another voicemail. And I was like, I have prepared so well for this, like mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I don't have time to stress about trying to get a hold of her.
Good for you.
I was like, let's call the doctor connected to her and see where he is. And so we called them and they're like, oh, you should be seeing your midwife. And I was like, we can't reach her. So they put us on hold for like 15 minutes trying to call her, could not reach her. And so they're like, the doctor's on call at this hospital. You can go there when you're ready. So that was our plan. My husband had the car packed up, all that. The midwife calls like an hour later. She's like, what's going on? Like, very nonchalant.
What do you
Um,
think?
I was like, I'm in labor. Let her know how far apart contractions were and things like that. And she was like, okay, just remember 511 and call me, or yeah, just let me know when you reach that. I continued to labor through most of the evening. And mind you, I slept through most of my labor. I don't know what made me so drowsy, but I was literally sleeping. I felt a contraction coming on. I would get in a position that made it more comfortable, just start tracking it. After the peak of the contraction, I would fall asleep most of the time and forget to stop the timer. It was crazy.
Wow.
Um, and so probably about 10 p.m., I felt a contraction and my body felt like it needed to push. It was a strong urge to push. And I like started clenching, like, oh no, baby can't come right now. And so I called the midwife right after that contraction. I'm like, hey, I feel like I need to push. And she's like, you need to feel that for at least an hour. So I trusted her. I was like, okay.
Well,
Um,
sure, because you've also never actually experienced the urge to push. So,
exactly. So I don't know. I'm like, okay, I guess I need to continue feeling this.
whoa.
And yeah. And so I kept every contraction, it kept feeling like I need to push. I kept clenching. Like I don't know how to have my baby on my own. And so and so I went to sit on the toilet because I've always heard that's dilation station. And it really did help relieve some of the pain during contractions. And so
Mhm.
I'm sitting on the toilet and my arms are on both walls, like clenching through the contraction. And I told my husband, I was like, call the midwife back, ask her, am I supposed to be resisting this or letting it happen?
Oh
And so
my God.
she's like, just let it happen. But you're still talking so well. So you aren't in active labor yet. Okay, I trusted her.
Not in active labor yet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So she was like, get in the bathtub and continue to labor, and call me back when you reach 511. I got in the bathtub. My husband had run the water a little while earlier. I got in the bathtub. Not even 5 minutes later, I yelled his name and I was like, I feel the head. I felt baby crowning. So he runs to get my mom. Both of our moms are here. And him and my mom come in and they call the midwife back and she's like, okay, I'm going to talk you through pushing. At that time is when we could hear in the background that she was at another birth, but she didn't want to tell us that for some reason, which was very disappointing. And so she talked me through pushing, and I pushed baby out in two pushes, and the head came out, and the body just shot out after that. My mom was like, "Pick the baby up, pick the baby up."
This
So
is in the
I
bathtub.
yes, in the bathtub. So I picked her up. She immediately started crying. We also didn't know the gender, so my husband's like, "What's the gender?" And I announced that, and she immediately latched and nursed. And so the midwife, she she was like, "I'm about 30 minutes away. I'll be there soon." So we stayed in the bathtub, and it took um an hour and a half later. She wasn't there, and so we called her back, and she's like, "I haven't forgotten about you." Okay, so so my husband's like, we're calling the paramedics because we need to cut the cord. We need to birth the placenta, which had not come out yet. Baby's vitals need to be taken. So they came and helped us with all that. And she showed up a little while later. But yeah, I birthed my own baby.
Wow. So not only are you a VBAC mama and a home birth mama, you're even an unassisted birth mama, which is like,
Yes,
wow, what a story.
crazy, crazy.
So obviously in the thick of labor, there's the emotions that go with labor, and then your midwife, how shall I say,
Being
her
neglectful.
yeah, that to call it like it is, right? Her neglectfulness, I'm sure stirred up emotions too. But what went through your head at the end of all of that? Like how did you feel? What were you thinking as you were sitting there having caught your own baby and done the whole thing basically yourself?
I was in shock, but I felt like Superwoman. I was looking forward to the redemptive story of a VBAC by itself. But I'm like, I just had my own baby at home in the bathtub. I got everything I dreamed of and more. Like, yeah. And God,
That's
and I, it was a definitely God carried me through that because so many things could have gone wrong. I hear so many horror, like not necessarily horror stories, but prolapse cord or nuchal cord or the arm coming out with the baby. So those are risky things that could have happened, and God was there with me the whole time.
so amazing. So
Yes.
amazing. How did your husband react?
So initially, he doesn't get like super excited and ecstatic about things, but um, in our group text, he was keeping them updated and he's like, he texted him, he's like, you guys aren't going to believe this. And so I knew he was blown away. And then like when we've shared it recently, he's like demonstrating how things went and he sings my praises.
He must be so proud. That's amazing.
Yes,
Oh, I love that. I love it.
I do too.
Wow. So, it's so interesting because, there's people that are listening to this that may be planning a VBAC or are planning a home birth, or some are even planning to go unassisted because that's a thing that people do on purpose.
Hmm.
I'm not comfortable doing that myself yet, but I
Same.
definitely understand the appeal for sure. Um, yeah, like do you have any advice or takeaways that you would share sort of from any both experiences, honestly, from either or both of your births?
I would say spiritual and mental and emotional prep, I want to say are more important than the physical prep.
Mm,
If I had not prepared mentally, I think I would have gotten frustrated or I would have told myself I can't endure this pain. Um, and things like that. Because even when we were preparing to go to the hospital, I told my husband, I was like, I think I'm going to get an epidural because I don't have to deal with this pain. And
mhm.
so I'm glad that I did it because, and I hate to say this because I know that labor is different for everyone, but it was not unbearable for me. It was painful for sure, but I prepared and I was like, I can do anything for 1 minute. I would say that through the contraction. Um, and I also, my affirmation when I'm weak, he is strong. Just relying on God. And then sometimes I would watch the timer and I knew that at the 30-second mark was my peak. and I knew that pain would start to diminish after that. And so when I reached there, I was okay.
Yeah.
And so just remembering those things in the moment, and also the breathing techniques that I practiced, reminded me that I was making sure that my body was not tensing up, because I know that you don't dilate well when you're contracted and stressed and anxious about it. And so I was very
Yeah.
intentional about those things. We did do some comfort measures that included my husband helping with pressure points and things like that, but I kind of didn't want to be touched during contraction in labor.
Yeah, I understand that. It's interesting. I kind of want to talk about the emotional preparation because everybody's different, and it's hard to say that what worked for me is going to work for you because you can't promise that. You know what I mean? You know
Right.
you better than anybody else does. But one thing that I couldn't agree more is your mindset and your stress level or lack thereof makes a huge difference. Like for me, with my two births, I had both of my babies at home and both were amazing. Wildly, wildly different one from the other. Um, with my first, because he was my first, I was not physically, entirely mentally, I was sort of pulling back with each contraction where I was like, I just need to get through this one. And I'm like, okay, I'd remind myself, okay, relax, breathe, whatever. But
Hmm.
in my mind, I was like, I don't like this. I don't want this. This is uncomfortable, whatever. And it wasn't until the very end where I was like, no, I need to like dive into this
I
mentally. I'm
remember
talking,
hearing you say that. Yes.
yeah. And then with my second baby, um, I don't know exactly, like, I don't even know. I think it was just because I finally realized this at the end of the first labor and it kind of stuck with me through there is from the very first contraction with my second baby, I was like, let's go. Let's do this. Like, yes. And every single contraction, I am not exaggerating, every single contraction felt productive. And they were intense. I got no breaks with my second one.
Oh
It was
no.
I with my first one, like you were talking about, like sleeping in between contractions, that was my first one. I took little power naps in between in
I
the
remember
pool.
you said that. Yeah.
It was so good. So I was like, this is gonna be great. I was totally expecting that with my second one. And it was just nonstop right from the get-go. From contraction number one, it was just go, 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 go.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and I wasn't expecting that. And you would think that that's bad or like unpleasant or like that wouldn't be something that I was excited about. But I think it was just my headspace. You know what I mean? Like I was just like,
Mm.
another contraction, let's do this thing. And everyone, I was like, he's further down and I can feel him going down. And now it feels
Oh
different.
wow.
And it was like exciting. Nothing changed except my mind. Do you know what I mean? Like I hadn't
Yes.
done it wasn't physically any different. I just changed my mind about my attitude toward my contractions. And it's
Yes.
really tough because like, how do you do that? You just say like, change your mind, which, if somebody's having a bad day, you're like, well, just have a good day. But there's some truth to that, right?
Very true.
Like there is something to that where you can be stressed and anxious. And I'm sure you experienced this during your second where, the midwife is woefully unpresent. And you probably were like, I don't have time to be mad. I don't have time to be annoyed. I got a birth
Yes.
to do here, right?
Yes.
So it's so wild. The whole the
I
whole mental aspect of labor is something that I, prior to having kids, wouldn't have thought as being such a big factor.
I agree. And I think a big part of it is limiting who's in your ear. Because also outside of my husband and like our immediate family and things like that, I didn't have a lot of people who really believed in having a VBAC. And
Mm.
so I had to go hard for that for myself and not listen to the doubts or fears that anybody else had. And also, leading up to labor, because I was overdue a week, everybody's checking in. Hey, is baby here yet? Is baby here yet? So I put my phone on do not disturb. I was
Good for
like,
you.
I cannot have all of y'all in my ear while I'm trying to focus and just let baby come here on my own because I don't want to
Yeah.
get anxious and anticipate why isn't baby here yet and all those things. So I trust that y'all care and y'all are just checking on me and baby. But at the same time, it's overwhelming how many people checked in and yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a good point though, that like all of these things from friends, the people that are telling you, well, are you sure? And is baby here yet? And maybe VBAC isn't the safest route, and this and that. Not only from friends, but even the OB and the tech,
Yeah.
the ultrasound, the doctors, everybody. I don't think that it's malice driving these communications. I don't think it's
Right.
because people are like, I'm out to get you and I want you to fail. I
Right.
think that there is a minuscule, if any, percentage of people that are doing that intentionally out of an effort to see you fail. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
all of it is done from a place of love and care and a desire for a good outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
despite that, it's so important that you, mama listening to this, advocate for yourself and do what you need to do. Like you said, like cut out the noise. And you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be, rude or harsh or
Right.
anything like that. It's just and you can be very matter of fact and be like, listen, I am protecting my space, my spiritual and my mental, you know,
Mm-hmm.
condition during this time. And you saying things like that is not welcome. If you need to talk about it with someone, you may. I'm not the person, I'm not going to
Amen.
read the horror stories that you send me. I'm not going to read this article that says that what I'm about to do is, dangerous. When the doctor comes in and says, well, your option is a dead baby, you have the right, and I would say the responsibility to say, no, you're not
I
allowed to
had
say
to
that. Try
I had
again.
to learn that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's hard, especially when you're a first time mom. Like, you don't know these things going in, and how could you? Like nobody tells you the doctor's gonna threaten you with a dead baby, and it's gonna be up to you to fight her. Like,
Right.
what? It's
Yep.
nuts.
I learned that second pregnancy to that I can advocate back and I did have an experience where a doctor was like rushing me through well, rushing to say what she had to say. And I was expressing my frustrations. And she was like, oh my gosh, can I finish? And I was like, wait, I have had horrible bedside manner this whole second pregnancy as well. And it's not fair that y'all can say whatever you want to say, but when I come to express my frustration, y'all don't want to hear it. And so
Right.
I was able to speak up more this time.
Yeah. Oh, another thing that I wanted to mention is when you're interviewing midwives, home birth midwives, even, um, most midwives have a system whereby they only take a certain amount of clients on per month. So like they won't take on and of course a
Hmm.
due date is not a due date, it's an estimation, right? So some
Hmm.
people have babies at 38, some people have babies at 42 weeks, anything, and they're like that's a wide window, right? But it's very smart, I would say, to find out first of all how many other, how many mamas do you take on with an estimated due date within a month? And also, what would you do if two mamas went into labor at the same time? I had a conversation with my midwife about that. And she actually has a network of other midwives and other, birth professionals that in a pinch would be able to take over. And they have their arrangements in terms of how they do things on there and like financially who gets the money, whatever. That's not the mama's problem. Like she's like, no, we have backups upon backups if something
Yeah.
happens. And like if one mama goes into labor and somebody else is close, like she's like, I give them a heads up. I say, hey, so and so is about to go into labor. In the event that, I'm needed in two places at once, could you go cover for me or something? So like that is something I wanted to mention for home birth, mamas who are planning home births. Those are really probably great things to ask to avoid a situation like you had
Yeah.
where the midwife was elsewhere You know, I mean,
And
it's not like she was just like dooting around. She was birthing another baby, but still a situation that in that moment you needed her, and there was
exactly.
yeah.
And crazy that we did ask her that when we did a consultation with
Oh
her, and
no.
she said she was like, I have these couple of midwives that used to work here at this birth center, and I have those as backups. And so that's why I had no concerns about this. I'm like, there's no way she could
Yeah.
be at another birth. She
Oh my
would
goodness.
tell us, or she would have us set up with somebody else, but nah.
Wow. Yeah, to feel the urge to push for an hour, that's a
It was,
lot.
yeah, it was rough.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I have a feeling that was the fetal ejectile reflex.
You know, it's
And
funny you mentioned that. I thought that was a myth.
I believed it. I just didn't know if I would reach it or not.
With my first, I pushed for, well, I thought I was pushing for 2 hours, and then I actually pushed for 2 hours and finally got him out. But again, I want to just like make a note that that had to do with my headspace. I was so scared of pushing, and
Hmm.
I didn't realize it until the very end, where I was like, oh, I just got to do it.
That
And then I
makes
did, and he
sense.
came out. With my second, I already mentioned how I was already like, I was in it to win it. I was like raring to just go. And my pool wasn't filling up fast enough. And I was
Oh,
like, no, we're not having the baby yet. We're not having the baby yet. And my husband was like, okay, cool. I'm like, get that pool filled up, then we can have a baby. My midwife arrived. She's like, so do you feel pushy? I'm like, no, absolutely not. No way. Absolutely not. The pool's not full yet. She's like, oh, cool. Okay. And then she like heard my next contraction. She's like, we're getting you off of the toilet now, and you need to go into a more gravity neutral position, because otherwise this child is going to fly out of you. And I was like, nah, that can't be right. No way. And I like waddled my way over to the living room. I was doing that, like, the birth bowl kind of whatever.
yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh no, he's like falling out of me. And I remember it was like 20 minutes after my midwife arrived. I thought I had hours to go. My midwife gets there. 20 minutes later, I looked up at my husband, who was like standing in front of me. I was over on the chair. I was like, is there someone behind me to catch a baby? And he's like, yep, you're good. And I was like, he's coming out. This is happening. I didn't push once. I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
I didn't think that was a thing. I thought like people were like, you can have a baby without pushing. And I was like, you also believe in like unicorns and fairies, don't you? Like, there's no way. And
Oh my God.
yeah, I didn't push a single time. In fact, I anti-pushed, if you will, where I was like, you will not
Stay in
take,
there. Yes.
you know,
Yeah. It's
it's crazy.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, this is another thing, I think you mentioned this in the birth story that you wrote up and sent me. I don't know, like, and it's tough, because how do you say this with enough conviction to really sell the point? But you gotta believe that your body knows what it's doing.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Your body is designed meticulously and perfectly to birth a baby.
Uh,
There
Yes.
are exceptions, of course. They are rare, and they are made more prominent by the medical system, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a doctor. I'm just some mom that is geeking out about birthy stuff, but your body knows what it's doing, and your instincts are powerful, and they are strong, and they are more often than not, emphatically more often than not, your instincts are spot on. Lean into
Absolutely.
and learn to trust them. And I would say, like, obviously that applies to labor and delivery itself, but also in the prenatal stage, like, if
Yes.
your gut's telling you everything is fine, like, I don't know if you can speak to this. You had all these medical professionals trying to scare you and telling you something was wrong and high risk, which just by itself is a scary label. Like, I'm like, hey, like, put on my forehead, high risk. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a terrible label. And I understand, like, there are situations that are actually high risk. Absolutely. I'm not denying that. You know what I mean? But like, Did you feel like there was anything wrong?
Absolutely not. And I'm not one of those naive people that's like, I'm going to have a home birth no matter what. I don't care what you say. If
Right.
they had told me there was something else medically wrong going on with my baby, I would be for sure listening to what they have to say. But
Right.
because my baby was healthy, all other measurements were fine. Baby was proportionate, although
Mhm.
small. All the organs were functioning properly. Everything was great, and also my health was perfect. I'm not gonna say perfect, but it was perfect.
Sure, sure.
uh, I was not concerned, and had no fears or even thoughts that anything else was wrong.
Yeah, I had the same experience in the opposite direction. My baby was very large. um, but again, like you said you were born small. I had talked to my husband and his mom, and my husband was 9 pounds 10 ounces when he was born. I was like 9 pounds 4 ounces when I was born. Like we're both. I mean, we're not. I'm not a like huge person, but like
Right,
I'm built pretty solid, and I'm like I have very wide hips. I don't know. I was. It just at no point was I like, oh, a big baby is like a threat to me
right.
health. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'm expecting a baby that's 9 something because that's my husband and I both were. Like my husband's kind of a big dude. Like he's tall. He's a big guy. He's like,
Yeah,
strong, muscular, big dude. And it just never occurred to me that that was a bad thing. Where I was like,
right.
I remember going to the OB and she's like, well, he's measuring big. I was like, cool.
Exactly.
Like, and like, I know, I instinctively know that. And she's like, we're going to have to induce you at 39 weeks. And I was like, because why? Well,
Right.
he's big. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, that's just what we do. And I was like, but I'm not concerned about it. Why are like educate me? Tell me why you're concerned about it. Is there a
Yes.
risk? Is he at risk for something? Am I at risk? She's like, well, you're at risk of tearing. And I'm like, wait, all the research I've done, which at that time wasn't a whole lot, but still I knew even then I was like, but people tear with 5 pound babies and there's people that don't tear with 11 pound babies.
Yep.
Like, you got to give me something more substantial than that. She's like, well, it's just what we do. And it was like this final authoritative, that's the end of the discussion. I'm like, I'm not your kid. You're not my mom. I'm paying you to work for me and help me birth my baby. Like, why do I feel like I'm like some insubordinate, lowling something and you're like the big boss telling me that I'm a
Seriously.
bad girl? And I'm like, this is so weird. And I remember coming home and my husband's like, how'd it go? And I'm like, fine, I guess. I don't know. Like, this is strange. But like, and it didn't occur to me at that time yet. It was about to happen a couple of visits later. But at that time, I was like, I feel like everything is fine. I feel like I'm healthy. I have no concerns. Like the baby is active, very
Hmm.
like my babies were running inside the womb and still haven't stopped. Like they're just go, go, go. I'm like, I'm not worried. And somehow like there was no need for fear. And they're like, well, you could tear. And I'm like, I don't know why this is being done. I don't understand. And again, like the all the doctors were nice. They were doing what they were trained to do. But I think it's the system and the incentives and the training
Yes.
and so forth. It's like the midwifery model of care. It's so, what's the word? It's how it's been done for far longer than any of us, could realize.
Yes.
This medical system is new, but it's become such the norm that it's like anything outside of that is looked upon as weird or dangerous.
Yep. Yep. Um, Two things. My
Yeah.
mom watched the documentary called The Business of Being Born right after my first baby was born. And I'm like blown away after watching that and the midwifery level of care and things like that. And also the OB in my second pregnancy who had me crying, she made it seem like midwives are like these uneducated, wild, I don't
Like you
know. Like she made,
some witch in
yeah,
the woods or something, right?
yes. She made it seem like it was so horrible. And then your story about the your OB reminded me that I also asked this OB at a different later appointment. I was like, "Is this hospital VBAC friendly?" And she
Mm,
said, "Yes, this hospital is VBAC friendly, but this doctor is not for your case." And I was like, "That's fine." And I had already made up my mind, like this doctor won't be the one delivering my baby.
mhm.
But I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And she was like, and she was like, "And because you're high risk, this hospital, the doctors at this hospital likely won't allow you to have a VBAC because they're going to recommend induction." And I was like, and I don't plan to show up for induction. And she was
Yeah.
like, I know, and that's why I can't deliver your baby. And I was like, I'm totally fine with that. So, um, and she emphasized that it's a huge liability to her. And I get that that's probably why most doctors are the way that they are because of the liability that comes with it, which is
Exactly.
understandable. However, I feel like there needs to be a certain level of individuality with care. Like it's so cookie cutter now. I hate it. But even with measuring the measurements for babies and things, there needs to be a level of individuality. The algorithm that they have is old and outdated.
But
And
if you think about it, if there's an algorithm, that means that they're going off of averages. And that means that half are below and half are above. And
right.
like, you know what I mean? It's just by the very nature of that, it's gonna be full of errors.
Yes.
You mentioned the business of being born. I cannot recommend that documentary enough. Like, oh my
Yes.
goodness. I I was toying with a home birth from actually my first pregnancy. I had a miscarriage. I was already kind of toying with the idea of home birth at that time. And I was like, I don't know. That's not, that's just not done. You're supposed to have the first baby in the hospital. And if everything goes well, then you have a home birth. I don't know where I got that idea, but I had that idea. Um, but I watched The Business of Being Born, and it really solidified for me my confidence in the I'll
The
call it a
space.
trend. I don't know, like the trend of home birthing. It's so funny to call it a
Yes.
trend because it's the normal. It's what people have been doing for centuries.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing is I was actually in preparation for our chat. I was looking to see if there were any other resources that people could go to for like if you're planning or looking at doing a VBAC. And there's one person that I really, really admire. His name is Dr. Stu Fishbein. He was an OB, and then he realized that the midwifery model of care is much better and much safer,
Hmm.
actually. And now he does really amazing work. He's got a podcast. Also, he does training for natural delivery of twins and breech babies and stuff like that. He's an amazing resource. Um,
Nice.
if you look up Dr. Stu Stu Fishbein, I'm not going to try to spell that out loud, but you'll find him. He recommends a website called VBACfacts.com. And I was just kind of perusing that before we got on our meeting here. And there's some really, really good resources there. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about VBACs. I'm not going to recommend anything. They are the right decision for some people. They are not the right decision for others. There are different, factors that play into whether or not it's a safe decision for you individually. But no matter what, my message would be, regardless of what you want to do, make sure you're educated on both sides. Like you said, like there are risks no matter which way you go. I mean, let's be real. There's a risk when you get into a car. There's a risk when you take a walk on a sidewalk. There's a risk when you do literally anything that is involved in living life, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but you want to weigh your risks, and you need to be the one to make that decision, not somebody who's incentivized and whose ideas are skewed by the system one way or the other. So check out vbacfacts.com. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just looked it up and it seems like a really great resource. There's a lot of different educational and resources, just all sorts of, connections, contacts, whatever. It seems pretty great. Definitely check that out.
I have a couple of more suggestions.
Absolutely, please.
Um, Even choosing a midwife for a VBAC, she took me through a questionnaire to determine if I was a good candidate for a VBAC. And so you can't automatically say you're good to go for a VBAC. There are medical things that need to be checked out as far as like C-section scar and all that type of thing. I also did chiropractic care throughout my pregnancy, and they have to be Webster certified for prenatal care. And she emphasized throughout my every visit, she's like, we're doing everything we can to get you that VBAC. So they will work with you and your body to prepare you as much as they can. And then this is not necessarily VBAC related, but I did utilize the um, Christian hypnobirthing app. My midwife also provided me hypno babies, but a friend recommended that Christian hypnobirthing app, and so I utilized that to prepare. And I also played it throughout labor. And I don't know if I heard it much. I guess my subconscious did, but because I was sleeping, I didn't hear much of it.
Sure.
So I would recommend those things, and then of course the other things that you hear all over TikTok and things like that: the walking, the stretching, eating dates, red raspberry leaf tea. I don't know which of those contributed to help,
I
but
don't know, but dates are delicious, so
yes. So yeah.
that's awesome. Well, like always, we're almost up on an hour. It always seems to just fly by. We could probably talk for hours more, but I think we're at a good point to wrap here. I hope that somebody here listening got something out of this, got a little bit more confidence or is able to advocate for themselves a little more. Is there anything that you want to say in closing?
Believe that your body is made to do this. You're capable of a VBAC as long as you mentally, spiritually, physically prepare. But like we said, most importantly, that mental and spiritual aspect of it. Um, you can do anything where you're capable of it.
I love it. Thank you so much. I'm so excited that we got to do this. I really appreciate you coming on. And we'll wrap it up here, and I will see you in the next episode.